Hello, all of you. Thank you for coming. Not on my behalf, but you didn't even know I was going to be standing here. So. I'm William O'Rourke. I've been around here for a long time, and I was here when we hired Valerie. In terms of creative writing, or you can enlarge that universe however far out you want to go. One of the wisest hires Notre Dame has ever made.
Yes.
And since she's gotten here, all I've done is praise her, meaning that literally, because Valerie has won about every award possible for Notre Dame to bestow on people, and the high administration officials who present these awards, of course, never write up the encomiums that accompany them, and they go and they find somebody to write those, and they point to me. I've been writing them for decades now. In fact, I looked at my computer and saw this long list of Valerie's award-winning history. So I decided, well, maybe I shouldn't praise her tonight, because that would be like bringing coals to Newcastle. You know, 'cause I've been doing that so much. Yeah, maybe I'd sound disingenuous, strange as that might sound. Anyway, but I will tell you one or two things. Valerie, when we hired her, amongst the things she did was convert the MA creative writing program that had existed for a couple of years, run off of the department's Xerox budget at that time, to an MFA, and she got a budget line from the dean at the time, who, like everybody else, took a shine to her immediately. And we had told Valerie, before she was actually hired, that she had to start a national literary magazine. Now, so she did that, except that she told me that nobody ever told her any such thing. That this was just some fantasy that we had conjured up amongst her duties. Also, at the time when we hired her, I wanted her to run the creative writing program forever. There are two models out there in creative writing landia. One is the Iowa model, where you just get somebody who's the face of the program and keep them there until they expire. The other model is that you rotate. So I was trying to insinuate that we wanted her to do it forever, but once she got in the office, she found the paperwork that showed it was a rotating position, so she rotated out as soon as she could. But amongst the many things I had on my computer, I had a letter that I wrote her from 1993, which I spell out in this letter. Anyway, so whenever we go to court, I have this letter. Okay, I could go on and on, obviously, about Valerie Sayers, but it's when a couple of years before we hired her and the program began as an MA, I did it to make Notre Dame better, to make the university better, to make the English department better. And that was my intention. Now, whether or not I could have done that on my own is really up for question, but it certainly happened once we hired Valerie, meaning everything improved. So she's made my life better, and everybody else's who's associated with her. Now, I had been, since I'm a kind of pessimistic fellow, had been a little dubious about her actually accepting the job, since she had seemingly such firm roots in Brooklyn. And I thought, how is she going to give this up? But she did, even though the roots are still, I guess, visible in a way in southern Brooklyn. She hasn't abandoned it entirely. But the distance between the East Coast and the Midwest has all sorts of repercussions to it. And again, doing all the things she's done here, I don't even think Valerie, in her progression here at the university, ever thought for a moment until, I don't know when, but not too many years, but the idea that she would ever be chair of the English department, I don't think was in her head when she got here. But even that has occurred. Okay, I'm not going to read this letter, as I thought I might, because I should get off the stage. But I do want to congratulate her again once more. She has now joined the other 1%. And believe me, it's always good to be in the 1%, no matter what anybody tells you, rather than the 99%. And she is in the 1% of contemporary authors. Contemporary only means they're living, or should be living, within a span of, the contemporary time. Contemporary authors, she's in the 1% of contemporary authors who have all their novels in print. And that is a real small number out there in the jungle of 21st century publishing. So here we are honoring that fact and honoring her.
William O'Rourke is my dearest friend and antagonist for these many years. Thank you so much. That was lovely. And thank you all so much for coming out on this cold night. I really considered canceling this event, and so it's very moving to see this full house here. And very terrifying, more terrifying than you can possibly imagine. This is a kind of, I've been telling everybody, a this is your life event in which horrible scenes flash before you. And the experience of revisiting my youth, because the first of these novels was started when I was 25 years old and pregnant with my first child. It's about a pregnant 15-year-old, so at least I had the good sense to lop 10 years off somebody's experience. But it's more than a little terrifying. It really is seeing someone else entirely. And when I timed a couple of little readings to see if I could get through them tonight, I discovered that I tripped over all the words in these early novels because they truly are written by somebody with a different voice and a very different sensibility. I decided finally to read a little bit from the first of these novels and from the last of them. These are the 5 novels that were published between 1987 and 1996. So the first, as I said, was begun when I was young and pregnant, and thought for some reason that I was rebelling against minimalism. When I read it again, I think, my God, this is minimalist. But I was certainly interested in writing some sort of parable about the experience of maternity. And this is the story of a 15-year-old girl who claims that she is having a virgin birth. And the title of the book is Due East, and this is just from the opening. I am told when I read from these Due East books that my voice sometimes goes due east and sometimes goes to Brooklyn, because that's where I wrote it. So it may veer quite wildly as I inhabit the voice of Mary Faith Rappel. The name of the chapter is A Virgin Birth. Since my mother died, I'd kept the same routine. In the afternoon, I walked the point, walked down River Street to buy the paper and my father's cigarettes. If my father's friends were downtown having coffee or fussing with their boats at the marina, they'd watch me down the street, all concerned and awkward. They were worried from the time my father told them he thought I was going crazy. All I'd said then was that I didn't want to wear choir robes anymore, that I thought Dr. Beatty's version of Jesus made him sound like a right-wing dictator, and that I had my own little visions before I fell asleep. I'd been complaining of dizziness too, but I hadn't meant for my father or his friends to think I was on the brink. And all this time, though, they hadn't forgotten it. So someone's eyes always followed me through due east. I didn't mind. It was like having a dog trail after me, or a guardian angel. I got back home at 4:30. The house was still clean from the morning vacuuming, so I had 2 hours to make supper. I read the paper and tried folding the napkins in different shapes. It never took 2 hours. Since I'd been pregnant, I'd been waiting for my father to find out and the routine to change. But every night when he came in for supper, he looked out past me, and I was beginning to think that he'd never see, that somehow I'd get through 9 months in a delivery, and one night he'd say, "How'd that baby get to the supper table?" Then one night he came in more tired looking than usual, and when he went to kiss me on the cheek, he missed and slid into his chair the way the saved slide into the baptism pool. Their eyes are half closed. I fetched him his tea, and he asked me if I had much homework, same as every night. Then he said, "Maybe you better not take any more of those potatoes, Mary Faith. Looks to me like you're getting a little pudgy." So I stared at the bowl of new potatoes on the dinette table. I couldn't eat the tuna fish, and I couldn't eat the peas. They stuck in my throat like words that couldn't go up or down. And if I was going to get any food in my belly at all, it was going to be those new potatoes. "Daddy," I said, "I'll just take another. I'm not having any bread." He didn't answer, and when I looked up to see what was bothering him, I lost my appetite entirely. My father washes up for supper, but he never gets rid of the curls of oil around his fingernails, and he never changes his shirt, so the gas fumes settle into our food. He runs the Plaid King gas station on the Savannah Highway. I always liked the smell of gasoline, but the pregnancy made me notice things I'd never seen before. "How come you didn't put more mayonnaise?" He was spitting pea skins into the air. "Tastes dried up." "Mayonnaise makes me sick anymore." "Everything makes you sick anymore," he said, and smiled a crooked smile. "Mary Faith, you used to be a good cook. What's got into you? You act bad as your mama did every time she was pregnant." He hadn't mentioned my mother in a year. She'd been pregnant 6 times, my mother, but I was the only one that took. The others all ended in miscarriages, and then she had cancer. "Well, I could be pregnant too," I said, hardly knowing that the words were coming out of my mouth. It didn't faze my father. He just kept pushing peas onto his knife and spilling them down again on the brown, shiny surface of our table. "Don't you fool that way," he said. "That's a crazy thing for a little girl to say." We finished up the way we usually do, not saying much of anything until he asked me what was for dessert. I told him we had ice cream, and I thought he'd beam that we didn't have to eat canned peaches again, but he grunted instead and held his head. "What you mean by that pregnant stuff?" "Nothing," I said. I picked up the dinner plates and carried them to the sink. "Mary Faith." He says it in a flat voice with a little edge of despair. He knows I hate my name, that I've asked him for 3 years to call me just Mary, but my mother changed her name to Faith one year when a tent preacher advised it. And he's always liked the sound. He's never once just called me Mary. "It wasn't anything," I said. "Uh-huh. You tell your daddy you're pregnant and then say it wasn't nothing. Wasn't anything. Don't you correct me. You are 15 years old. You keep a civil tongue in your head." "Yes, sir." That drives him crazy. There's something about the way I say, "Yes, sir," not with any mocking and not with my voice raised, just flat, the way he says, "Mary Faith," that sets him off. You get back to this table, he said, and I did, but I couldn't keep my eyes on him. Are you pregnant, he said. I'd never expected that he would ask, just straight out like that. And in a way I was right, because he pulled back from the question and laughed his good relieved laugh and said, what am I talking about? And that's the beginning of a virgin birth. Which does indeed take place. And